What up, Facebook Live family and friends? The Head Therapist is back. Elliot Andre, Connected Roots, here with a super special interview with my friend here, Paulina Siegel. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell people where you're at.
Hi, I'm Paulina Siegel. I have a private practice in the Wash Park neighborhood, and I specialize exclusively with Gen Z and millennials. So that's anyone 15 to 39 years old.
That is such a needed niche. I think a lot of people forget how tough it is to be a millennial in this day and age. And today we're here to talk about a couple things that really, I think, hit a lot of notes in many people's minds. So Paulina, let's talk about 4 tips to recharge by setting healthier boundaries with social media. And to give everybody an idea of what we're gonna go through, we're gonna start with talking about setting a good limit. So Paulina, if you could speak to that, what that looks like, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So one, I think all generations are struggling with social media because there's this addictive component to it. But I would say millennials in particular are very enmeshed in it and are struggling with social connection and being able to engage fully because they're trapped up behind a screen. So I created this tip sheet, which I can send to anyone who is interested. So feel free to send a DM to either Elliot or myself, and then we will get you that tip sheet. But one, I think what we know through research is that people that use social media for a certain amount of time, various platforms, that it's affecting their mental health, their sleep, their general health, and also productivity, whether that's in school or in employment. And so we know there's a direct correlation between social media use and a decrease in mental health or decline in mental health, and also an increase in substance use disorders. So setting healthy boundaries is imperative because we need to be able to be balanced individuals and feel like we're not struggling with potentially technology addiction.
Absolutely. I think you speak to such a big part of our culture in the sense of being enmeshed with things. And I really want to get deeper into that kind of conversation about what that may look like for people, because I feel like a lot of people who are enmeshed don't really realize it. So if you could talk this idea, really like kind of hounding the idea of limits, trying to get away from the enmeshing of things, what you think, hypothetically with a client or what have you, you could bring into the conversation today.
Yeah. So tip number 1 is setting limits, which seems like a no-brainer, but this is really challenging because we are so connected and addicted. But one thing that research says is that people that use multiple social media platforms, so that could be Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, multiple. I think the study said if you're using 5 or more platforms per day, that you are 3 times more likely to develop depression and anxiety symptoms.
Wow.
Which is wild, 3 times more likely. So just by using all of those platforms in one day, it increases your likelihood of mental health problems.
I'm sorry, that stat just blew my mind. Like, I had no idea that it could lead to that. And I want to even dive further into it because this setting limits is so hard for people and generally really something that we all struggle with. What percentage in your eyes would you say that people then would develop like an addiction disorder?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I don't have the stats of how many social media addicts leads to substance use disorders,
right.
But we do know, generally speaking, that it increases co-occurring symptoms, co-occurring being substance abuse paired with mental health. But I think that's probably something I'd love to look into because it would be good to know that. So going back to setting limits, 1, we know the more platforms you use per day, the higher the risk is of developing mental health symptoms. So a good rule, before we get to that piece, I want to speak to the first thing, is if you are on social media, let's say an average of 6 hours per day, a good rule of thumb is to decrease it or start to by 35%. So that would be if you're watching or viewing 6 hours, it goes down to 4. Now, that number is a bit arbitrary, but it's enough of a reduction where we'll start to see a mental health benefit from it.
Totally, and I think that's totally fair, and I think lowering that is, a lot easier said than done. How, in the space of a therapeutic setting, do you feel like you could I don't say enforce that, but just like really make sure that that may be happening in people's lives. Because I think we could say that, and then it's like something distressing happens or something, you know, they're uncomfortable with, and it's just like a comfort place, you know, just to be on your phone or watching something. So could you speak to that, like in regards to how you think you can hold clients accountable in that regard?
Yeah. And I think you're right. Unless we're checking in about it, there's no measurement or tool to monitor it. But having those conversations in session where if someone creates a goal around social media to reduce, to check in each session and say, hey, how many hours on average were you on social media this week? Luckily, if you have an iPhone, it tracks that for you. And you can actually get an alert, and it will tell you on average per week how many hours you spent. So you can take that weekly average and then shoot to reduce it by 35%. So I think the accountability piece is just checking in to say, hey, where are you at? Okay, you didn't reduce. What happened? What were the barriers? What got in the way? And then continue to check in about that.
It's like the healthy habits are there. The technology is there now to support those healthy habits, which again, to me is such a cool concept of what companies like Apple or whoever developing these programs are doing. So it's really, I think, beneficial. It's just people need to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. So not only are we going to reduce by 35%, but then if you are noticing that you are on 5 or more platforms per day, to try to reduce to 1 to 2 and stick to those for the day. So what you can think about is creating an intention. Today I'm deciding to only access Snapchat and Facebook. Then maybe the next day you pick your next 2. And really sticking to that commitment you made for yourself. And we know that will decrease mental health symptoms too.
100%. Love it. I think that's really tangible.
Yeah.
People can really do that. 100%. What else we got? What other tips? We started with one. Let's go to the next tip.
We're going to work through these tips live. And then, of course, you have access to this yourself if you just DM either Elliot or I.
Yep. And give us a thumbs up, too, if you're ready, you're watching, and you're excited to do that, because we're here for you.
Yeah,
totally.
And we are so grateful if you're willing to share this, because we believe that it will really be helpful to people on Facebook.
Absolutely.
Okay, tip number 2, ask family and friends for support. So what I meant by this is, 1, we can't control other people's choices, right? I can't control that my friend Sarah has been scrolling on Facebook for 30 minutes while hanging out with me, right?
We wish we could.
We wish we could.
Right?
It's out of my hands. But what we can do is advocate our needs. So what I've recommended in this tip is to have those conversations with friends and family to say, hey, I'm trying to reduce my social media time. You know, would you be willing, when you're hanging out with me, to only get on social media to post pictures? And we're both going to commit to not doing the aimless scrolling that we do through news feeds. And, some friends and family might honor that and others won't, but it's a really productive step to advocate your needs, to say, hey, would you be willing?
Yeah, I think, again, that's one of those things that people really struggle with, because it's, in any type of moment, I'm bored or I'm trying to have a conversation that's not working well. It's just easy, right? Like checking with people, knowing what's up. I mean, I get it. I think we all do it in some regards. I think the idea of setting that really nice boundary around it makes sense. I feel like it's really hard for people to do that sometimes, in regards to family, especially because, they're like, oh, well, I see you all the time. Like, I don't feel like I need to really do that. So I'd be curious for you to give an idea or speak to, what's realistic in that regard and what might be really kind of difficult for people in some regards. I know it's a very general question, but I think, people can get frustrated or angry when they're told to get off their phone or things along like that. So I don't know if in your experience what that's been like, but if you could speak to it, that'd be great.
No, definitely. I think it's, again, we can't control how people show up, but what we can do is have those conversations and explain to someone what we're trying to accomplish. So, hey, this might seem silly, but I'm trying to reduce my social media consumption. While we're hanging out for the next hour, would you commit to me to only post pictures that we take? Or would you commit to at least 30 minutes just being mindful with me and not being on your phone? Another idea is just, having a basket, which might only be able to happen if you're in someone's home, but just where you guys take your phones and place it somewhere out of reach so that you can connect and fully engage, because that's what makes life meaningful, is connection. So I would just say it's about conversations. And if a friend's not willing to do that, or a family member, then, making sure that you are setting those limits on your own so that it might be able to counterbalance the things that we can't control.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's their own stuff that's coming to the table, right? It's not you, it's their own projections. And I think setting limitations and intentions is so needed these days.
Yes.
Really kind of framing, what we're here for. I think you said that so beautifully in regards to any type of relationship, friends, family, intimate partners, and all that. So let's keep on going down the line. We're doing so good. We're killing it right now. Thank you all for watching. This has been great so far.
Third tip, be aware of your emotions and practice acceptance. This one I think is a little bit harder to conceptualize, so I'll jump in and explain it. But what we know is that, people that are struggling with technology addiction do experience withdrawal symptoms, right? Whether that's increased stress or anxiety or irritability. And so you can think of those symptoms as withdrawing from something that you're attached to. And so it's quite possible that if you set social media boundaries, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel stressed out or anxious, or maybe even experiencing FOMO, that you're missing out on something, because that's our way of seeing what everyone is up to. So owning that and knowing that that will probably be your experience, and instead of fighting and avoiding and challenging the emotions, which is instinct for humans, no one likes feeling discomfort, instead having a mindset of openness and curiosity. So if I've put my phone away for an hour and I haven't touched it and I start to feel jittery or stressed or worried, like being curious to that experience. Okay, I'm feeling anxiety. What does that feel like? What does that look like? Where does it sit in my body? What might I learn from this emotion? Because if I just go, oh, I can't handle this, I'll just put on Netflix. Well, one, I'm still being on a screen, but it doesn't help us effectively process emotions when we avoid. So tip number 3 is really bringing curiosity and openness to your emotional experience, even if it's uncomfortable after you set that social media boundary.
Totally. And I think you're speaking to a lot of different avenues of what that looks like: avoidance, not wanting to feel distress. And, people are kind of scared of that. Like nobody wants to be in a place where they feel like they're uncomfortable. Absolutely. And I think there's so many skills out there, right? And I don't want to be dorky and bring in DBT, but like radical acceptance, thought diffusion, things that I bring into my own practice and group therapy, and really preach to people, because really realistically, feeling distressed is okay. Right. And sitting with that is okay. Right. And I know, I don't want to be general when I say this, but I think a lot of the times with addiction, people are stuck in that space of like, how do I get places? How do I go places? Because I feel so uncomfortable. Yeah. Could you speak to the idea of like how you might handle a client differently who maybe is using substances versus not, and this idea of like allowing distress? Yeah.
I mean, speaking to what Elliot said, is humans are wired to avoid discomfort. It's a biological process that has kept us alive for many years. It's survival.
Fight or flight, survival, of course. Yeah. Cave woman. Cave people.
Cave people. So if a client's like, hey, I'm feeling shitty, I don't like this, help me get rid of it. Right. It's going to be hard for that client to hear when I go, what would it be like to be in it actually? Yeah. Right? And that can be an uncomfortable and scary question to clients. But what we know with substance use is a lot of that is driven as a way to escape, to numb out, to not have to be present and curious, but instead tap out. And so I think when it comes to addiction work, which I do in my practice, is making sure is teaching my clients how to deal with distress tolerance. If your threshold of discomfort is pretty narrow, then it's up to me to help you give tools and techniques to increase that threshold so you can sit in things a little bit longer, so that substances don't seem like the only way to cope. Totally. So I think with addiction, it's absolutely teaching clients to deal with the stressors and discomfort that come their way, so that substances aren't their only outlet. Mm-hmm. But then with general mental health, depression doesn't feel comfortable. Anxiety doesn't feel comfortable. None of it feels. Of course. No one wakes up and is like, I can't wait to feel anxiety today.
I feel so great to be depressed.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I can't wait for the next depressed day. That doesn't happen. So It's all about using therapeutic techniques, whether it's DBT or ACT, And a lot of the work is mindfulness. How can you be present and curious to your experience? And just by doing that, we learn a lot.
Absolutely. And I think when you said mindfulness, I think people are like, what the hell is that? So if you could just really quickly kind of give us an idea of how you might use mindfulness in your practice with dealing with some of these issues real quick, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfulness, I'll give you the formal definition. It's paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment.
#legit.
Yeah.
I love that you just said that so beautifully. Honestly, that was amazing. I was like, whoa, yes.
Just pulled that one out of my ass.
Right.
Yeah, so let's break it down.
Right.
Paying attention on purpose to the present moment without judgment.
Yes.
Now, the judgment piece is hard. We are critical creatures. That's what makes us so much more advanced than than the animal kingdom. So if we are practicing mindfulness, if you notice that you have set a boundary with social media, I'll bring it full circle now, and you start to notice FOMO come up, which is not an emotion, but as millennials, we know what that means, fear of missing out.
Of course.
It's uncomfortable. So if I was practicing mindfulness, I would just ask myself, what am I experiencing? Where do I feel this FOMO? Okay, I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my throat. Okay, how can you breathe into this experience? So I do a lot of breath work, and there is specific types of breathing techniques, specifically the 4-7-8 method that is backed by research. We know it works. And I would have them, close their eyes and visualize. What does the emotion look like in your body? Describe it to me. Describe it to me with so much detail that I could visualize. So maybe they say it's like this black, spiny creature that just is heavy, and if I were to touch it, it feels hot. So they're visualizing the emotion. This is a technique called expansion. And then I would have them do the 4-7-8 breathing and breathe into that emotion. And that would be a way to emotionally regulate and, create more tolerance for that experience. And that's a mindfulness practice in itself.
I mean, you just sold me, so.
You want to do it right now?
Yeah, I do. Thumbs up, yo, if you want to try that right now, because that sounds amazing. Seriously. There's so many people out there who can't cope generally with those feelings. So to have a tangible skill represented on Facebook Live for everybody to see right now is so crucial, honestly. So thanks for sharing that. It's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Let's keep on moving down the list. Okay. I got one more tip for you.
One more tip, last but not least. Okay, identify your top 5 values and take effective action. So again, if you're setting boundaries with social media, that means you have more free time, right? Because you're not stuck behind a screen. So maximize that free time and begin to explore, what do you care about? What do you stand for? What do you want to live by? These are questions that help us identify our values. And values are essentially actions that we can take on a daily basis to get closer to who we are, as well as to practice something that we find valuable and important. So by identifying these values on your spare time, since you are not scrolling through a feed.
No more of that.
No more of that. Not forever, but just for a little bit. Just if you value health, okay, if I'm decreasing my social media consumption by 2 hours, that's 2 additional hours where I could go do something that would get me closer to my value of health. So maybe I go to a kickboxing class, or I go for a long walk with the pup. Or I just do some yoga through YouTube. Now I know that's behind a screen, but that's still something that's helping your body. I think that's a good place to start. The other piece is, once you have clarity as to what's important to you, then you can create the actionable steps to get there. So if health's important to you, or maybe humor is something you value, like go to a comedy club, go to a comedy show, just futz around with your friends and laugh. That's far more meaningful than seeing what, a bodybuilder is doing at 2 p.m. on their Friday, right? That's not rich.
No, I don't think that's rich at all. I think we get stuck though, because again, it's that feeling of not wanting to feel distressed. And it's safe, it's comfortable, it's easy, right? I mean, who comes home after a long day and is like, I really want to exercise, right? I mean, some people for sure, but realistically, it's like, well, I'd rather watch somebody else exercise in that regard. So I want you to speak to that before we wrap up in regards to like how to encourage that even more so. Because again, we can talk about it and we can give a tip, but like tangible, ideas of what that may look like, other than going to the comedy show or doing this or that, that you've had experience with or recommended to clients.
No, it's a great question. So first you have to identify what are your values. If you don't know what they are,
I was hitting at.
You can't really take any effective action.
Sure.
So someone said, bonjour from Paris.
Oh, hey, Mom, what's up? Biggest fan. Thank you. Love you.
Sorry, got distracted about Paris.
It happens.
So one, you have to identify. Pick your top 5. If you are struggling to think of values, you can Google values on the internet, and it will generate a list of all the different types of values.
Yes, Google.
So that makes it easier for us. But the ones that I put on this tip sheet, just as ideas: connection, individualism, health and fitness, adventure, humor, and balance.
Love it.
So those are just some that I find that my millennial clients really connect to, but I would imagine there's ones that are more specific for yourself. So one, find that list, identify and prioritize them. If health is your number 1, start there. If you've worked through 1 and 2 and feel like you're really living by that value, then try number 3 and 4, and then go to 5 on your list. So once you identify it, then what I want you to do is think, what actions can I take that get me closer to this value?
Amazing.
So Elliot, what's a value of yours?
I think humor is honestly humor and just relaxation for sure, 100%.
Okay,
yeah.
So if you wanted to live by humor this week, give me 3 steps you could take to get closer to it. I'm putting him on the spot.
I love it. I love it.
We did not prepare this.
This is fantastic. I would try to tell jokes and laugh as much as I could.
Okay.
I would definitely go to some sort of movie entertainment show in that regards, and then I would laugh at myself in moments of uncomfortable feelings, distress, anxiety, for sure.
Right? So he identified a value, and then he just outlined 3 steps he can commit to get closer to that value.
Hold me accountable.
I will. I'm going to be texting him every day, just being like, did you laugh now?
I just did.
The other piece is values work is backed by research. I'm a huge research gal. Anyone who's watching who knows me already knows that. But we know that people who live by their values feel more connected, have a more whole and rich life, and feel far more satisfied than people who don't live by their values. So you have a lot of time, you have spare time now. And I'm going to invite you to really think about, how can you sit in discomfort, bring curiosity and openness to it? How can you start acting in alignment with your values now that you have more free time since you're not on social media? And really, how can you advocate to family and friends your goal around this? As well as, stick to that commitment that you make. And I would be curious, I'm all about feedback too. What is it like by following these tips? What have you noticed? Has it helped? Has it not helped? I think it's valuable feedback for both of us. So again, if you want the tip sheet, just send a direct message. We will get that to you ASAP. And if you also want to provide feedback to how it worked or didn't, that is meaningful to me.
Absolutely, me as well, 100%. Yeah, we all want to know what we can do better and how it's been helpful. Absolutely. Awesome. Facebook family, love you all. Thanks so much for watching. Paulie, where can we find you? How can we contact you in that regards? And then we'll wrap up here for the day.
Great. So the best way to contact me is through my website. It's www.courageouspathsplural.com. Or sorry, courageouspathcounseling.com. I don't know where that would have sent you. So courageouspathcounseling.com.
Awesome.
And you'll notice at the top right-hand side, there's a contact button. If you click that, you'll put your name, number, and then an actual message, and it forwards to my personal email. And then I can either touch base with you over email, or we can jump on a phone call. But certainly website is a really good place to learn more about what I do in the community. Again, I have a private practice that specializes in Gen Z and millennials, anyone 15 to 39, and I'm here to support. So let me know what I can do.
Absolutely. Thanks again so much. Appreciate you so much. That was so amazing.
Thanks.
All you out there, thanks for watching. We'll catch you soon. Bye.